Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Hite Namani.
The thing that stands out the most in my mind of the classes that I heard was, for some reason, this vision of Srila Prabhupada sitting on the Vyasasana and referring to a painting which was just in front of him on a wall. And it was a painting of Srimati Radharani offering tulsi leaves to the lotus feet of Krishna. And in the background you see the figures of the gopis sort of looking through the trees, looking on. And so Prabhupada was talking about that painting and how Srimati Radharani is serving Krishna, and the gopis are assisting Srimati Radharani in her service to Krishna, and other gopis are assisting those gopis. And Prabhupada raised his finger and he said, so this is our philosophy, that we are the servants of the servants of the servants, and the further down the line you go, the sweeter that service becomes. So I remember so vividly how Srila Prabhupada raised his finger, moved his finger down and said, the further down the line you go, the sweeter that service becomes.
The only thing was when I got initiated, he asked me, what are the 4 regulative principles and how many rounds do you chant, will you chant? And I told him the 4 regulative principles, and then I told him I would chant 16 rounds. And then he said, are you sure? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And then he started laughing. And he said, I'm asking you if you're insured, because you have a spot on your face. I have a mole on my face here, and when I was younger, it was darker. And he said, you have a spot on your face, and once there was a movie star with a spot on her face, and she had it insured for a lot of money. And then he just started laughing, and everyone was laughing. He was just chuckling, and then he said, Krishna consciousness is your only insurance.
Another time, I asked him, what do you think about psychotherapy? What do you think about analysis? And he said, I have some appreciation for it. He said, one of my children came back from college and was tapped his forehead. He wasn't right in the head. And so at that time in Calcutta, there were 2 wings to the hospital. There was a British wing and a Hindu wing. And he said, I spent a lot of money sending my son to the British wing to get help from a therapist from England. And I asked him, how did it work? And he said, for some time it did. He said he was, better, normal. And then he said, one day he left home and I never saw him again. So that kind of candid response to what might have been an impertinent question says to me that this was someone who had no guile. He was not hiding behind some kind of a facade of, Jagat Guru. He was a warm person who, if you asked him a question honestly and legitimately, he was there for you. He would answer your question.
The young men, even in those days, 1966, 67, 68, they were saying women shouldn't give classes because they're less intelligent. So Govindadasi happened to have been one of Prabhupada's personal servants at that time, she and her husband Gursundar. So I asked her to ask Prabhupada for me, is it true that women can't advance as quickly as men? And I was feeling depressed. So Prabhupada told her to tell me, yes, if you think you're a woman, how can you make any advancement? And when one of the brahmacharis wrote to Prabhupada that I shouldn't be giving classes because we were all equal. And many girls were giving classes in those days, Kanchan Bala, Leela Sukha, myself. And so one of the brahmacharis wrote to Prabhupada and said, this is not right. So Prabhupada said, he quoted the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Chaitanya said, Kiba Vipra, Kiba Nyasi, Sudra Keninai, whether one is a sannyasi or a brahmana or anything, if he knows the science of Krishna, then he can be a teacher of Krishna consciousness. And even if you think that women are less intelligent, still everyone should be given a chance to speak.
I had a question in my mind about sickness and how we become sick. Do we become sick from karma? Do we become sick from our minds? Do we become sick from uncleanliness? How does sickness come upon us? And I hadn't been able to form it into a question, a question that I could actually ask Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada and I were walking along the big main street, and there's a church there called Christuskirche. And so we were walking along, and I was thinking about this while I was taking the walk with Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada stopped, and he turned to me and he said, 90% of all sickness is caused by the mind. And then off we went on our walk, continuing. So that's just something which I always remember. And in other classes that Srila Prabhupada has given, he's mentioned something about the effect of the mind on the body and the body on the mind. So the position of the mind we have to be very careful of, because it will affect the body. So at that time, Prabhupada explained to me that 90% of all sickness is caused by the mind. But another thing that's very instructive is that Srila Prabhupada actually read my mind. He knew what I was thinking about, and I didn't even ask the question, and he answered it right there. So that was very instructive to me, that spiritual master Srila Prabhupada, he read my mind and knew what I was thinking about.
I actually used to hear many classes that we're always talking about, because Madhavisa really liked telling us about how even if we were a blade of grass, that we'd be eternally happy. And I was so despondent by that. I tried to keep very upbeat, but I was very despondent by that, thinking, wow, here I am in a human body, and I'm going to be stuck as a blade of grass for the rest of eternity. Yeah, not sure about that one. But anyway, Srila Prabhupada came to to Melbourne a couple of times when I was, after I joined. And in 1975, early in the year in 1975, he was actually giving different lectures. But because I joined when I had a little baby, I was pregnant, and my little baby Damodar was only young, around 2 years old, when I was going to the temple, actually living in the temple. I didn't get to many darshans, and I didn't get to as many classes because I had a child, or I had to sit right at the back and run out if there was any noise. But on this particular occasion in Melbourne, the mothers were sharing the minding of the children, and Prabhupada was giving the class. And I was sitting at the back, just in case I had to run out, and Prabhupada was asked a question at the end of the lecture related to being what is our eternal form in the spiritual world. And Prabhupada said, and it felt like he looked straight at me at the back, seriously, it felt like he looked straight at me and said, in the spiritual world, everyone has human form, but if you want to be a flower for Krishna, you can be a flower. And I felt so relieved. I just thought, oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhupada.
Part of our thing was the In God We Trust Party for Purified Leaders. And for that, we were really talking about being part of the government, you know. And I said to Prabhupada that you really envision a time when devotees will run countries and command armies. And he said, yes. And because he had been talking about this, eventually a war between the devotees and the demons. He had said, and I'm going back a little bit, the same conversation, he said, therefore there should be a war. He said, these wars where the demons fight the demons doesn't accomplish anything, because whoever wins is a demon. But he said, if you have a war and one side is devotees and the other side is demon, then that's Krishna consciousness. And so he was really talking about, when we had the In God We Trust party, he was thinking about what government does. And government is the rule of law. And so I had already been scared by some devotees. So I had a doubt. And so I was able to ask him, you envision time when devotees will run countries and command armies? And he said, yes. So I said, then how in that circumstances can we be sure that we won't become demons? He said, chant 16 rounds a day and follow the 4 regulative principles. And I said, and that's enough? And he said, yes, that's enough.
In Detroit, we were very fortunate that we were able to edit Srila Prabhupada's books. And I wrote Srila Prabhupada when I became pregnant with my son. And he wrote me such a kind letter back. And he said, I told him how I was going on Sankirtan full time. And he wrote me back. And he said, in the advanced stages of pregnancy, you should not travel by train or plane, and you should refrain from going on Sankirtan. And we would go for 8 hours a day in Detroit. And so I began editing Krishna book and also preparing prasadam for the devotees when they would return. And at that time also, I was working on children's version of Sri Upanishad. And I sent Srila Prabhupada the first chapter. And he wrote me back and he said, for children, it must be very easily understood. He said, for example, how can they understand this term Brahmajyoti, which I had included? He said, you must say, instead of Brahmajyoti, you must say, just as there is sun, there is shine coming from the sun, so there is another shine coming from Krishna's body. That is Brahmajyoti. So he said, do this work very nicely.
While Prabhupada was staying in Juhu, of course, every morning he would go for his walk. Sometimes he would take a little ride, but usually he would just go right to the beach. It was a block away. So every day you could set your watch by Prabhupada, for the morning walk with the sunrise. So he'd come down the stairs, and of course he gets out the door, there's 20, 30 devotees there, which is a lot. They're all living there in Juhu. And everyone's offering obeisances down on the ground. But there was a young boy, and he was standing like this, just had his hands folded. And Prabhupada just kept walking, and he looked at me. He said, this is the beginning of his fall down. Just like that one item. And then he just walked on. So that's why I say it was always very important to never lose that focus of who you were dealing with, because it was easy, it wasn't a difficult thing. And of course, when you're with him, you would get to see it with yourself, and you could see it with others. And he would do his best to cure it. Prabhupada would, so many times he called us into the room, tell us to, wake up, stop sleeping. He could have just ignored all of it, but he knew he had to keep us focused, especially being with him.
Because what I had heard is that this one devotee had told me that he told Prabhupada that I was lazy. And so I was really brokenhearted, you know, that I would think that Prabhupada would think I was lazy. Not that I'm not lazy, because now I know I am. But then I didn't feel like I was lazy. And I was really angry and also felt hopeless because there was just no way, you know, that I was going to please Prabhupada or do anything right, you know, at that point. So anyhow, Srila Prabhupada was there, and I went up to his desk. I had the courage. I mustered it up. And I said to Srila Prabhupada, I just folded my hands, and Prabhupada came up and smiled. And so I knew I could speak. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, and I got out a few words, and then I just started crying completely, like, whoa! I mean, it was deep crying, like I should have been in therapy or something, you know. But Prabhupada sat there, and I was crying, Prabhupada, I'm a woman. There's no way I can please you. I'm a woman, and I have children, and they say I'm lazy now. And Srila Prabhupada, at that point, when he heard that, then I saw his arm go back, and he did this smile. It was like the universe or something. And when he did that smile, I just, oh my gosh, you know, how could he think that was a smile thing, you know? Because I was so sad. But that smile was like, he embraced me, you know, with that smile. And then he said to me, he came close and he goes, are you reading my books? That's what he said to me. Are you reading my books? And I was reading his books, because that's one thing that moms can do, okay? And when you're breastfeeding, everything is you could read books, okay? So I was reading, I was all the way up to the book that he was finished with, you know, and at that time it was probably like 7th canto, 6th canto or something, 5th canto, I don't even know. But it wasn't very much. But the thing was I read them. And so I said to Prabhupada, yes, Srila Prabhupada, I am reading your books. And he said, then you are pleasing me. Yeah. And I mean, you could imagine, and I just was so grateful, and I just felt so much love. That's why I say the unconditional love changed my life.
So on one occasion, we were just returning from the morning walk. We were nearing the temple. Dr. Patel was walking and having animated conversations with Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada was saying something critical about one of the well-known, you know, figures of the recent history. And Prabhupada was quite critical. And Dr. Patel, as he had done many times, really objected strongly to Srila Prabhupada's criticism. And he was asking Prabhupada, why do you have to criticize? Let them be. You do your thing, let them do their thing. Just leave them alone. Why do you have to criticize them? They are great souls in their own right. So let them just be. If you don't agree with their philosophy, just let them alone. And then Srila Prabhupada stopped. And Prabhupada said that if I'm in an operating room and I'm conducting a operation with a patient, and someone comes into the room and starts cutting my patient, am I going to just stand there and watch it happen? No. I'm going to say, get out! Prabhupada said loudly, get out, you rascal! So I cannot be silent. These rascals and fools have destroyed the culture of India. And therefore I must speak out. And I will speak out. Prabhupada is very, very strong.
I do remember one thing he said, that here in Los Angeles, many people go surfing. The devotees were talking about surfing, and then Prabhupada underneath his breath, because I was right there, and I could hear Prabhupada very clearly. And he was saying something underneath his breath, you know, and I'm like listening, you know, and he was like, suffer. So then, the devotees, the sannyasis that were there close, they said, Prabhupada, no, it's not sufferers, it's surfers, Prabhupada, they're surfers. they're surfers and they go in the water, you know, and they ride the board. And they were trying to explain this to Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada said, yes, he said, and they will ride the waves just like the dolphins, and they go right through the waves just like the dolphins. So they are getting ready for their next body. And, and we all just laughed, and Prabhupada's little hands were all pink, and they were so beautiful. And we were just so blown away by his exuberance and his vision. He had such vision. And sometimes when you go to the airport, okay, they would complain. They would complain, the employees, they would complain, you guys leave all these petals on the floor. We got to, sweep them up. It's a big thing, you know. There's like 200 of you that come to the airport and you got all these flower petals everywhere. Anyway, so they told Prabhupada that, right? And Prabhupada said, He said, so they are not complaining for all the cigarette butts on the floor, you know. And Prabhupada did so many things at the airport. You know, he would sit down waiting for his flight, and, you know, we'd be there like around him. And, you know, this lady that was there visiting our temple, she was a nurse, and she was, you know, a little eccentric. Anyway, she loved Prabhupada. So she was there, you know, seeing Prabhupada off. And so a few other sannyasis were sitting there on the airport bench, you know, with Srila Prabhupada waiting for the flight. And Prabhupada had his cane, and he was like this, you know, just waiting for us, looking around, you know. And then he was looking, he looked at the nurse, and then he looked at the devotees sitting on the chair, all the guys. He actually told them to leave so that this lady could sit down. Okay? Prabhupada was the perfect gentleman.
Oh, another time in Los Angeles, the first time they played the Govinda prayers. First time in the history of ISKCON, I was there. And as Prabhupada entered the temple room, Vishnu John turned on the Govinda tape. And I used to always try and be behind Prabhupada's lotus feet so I could try and put my head at his lotus feet as he was offering his obeisances to each deity, you know, to Gaur Nitai, to Radha Rukmini, to Radha Krishna, and to Lord Jagannath. And then he'd go sit at the Vyasasan. So that day, I'll just never forget, because when he sat on the Vyasasan, he was feeling such ecstasy. And tears were like shooting from his eyes. And those of us who were sitting near at the bottom of the Vyasasan, we were getting showered by Prabhupada's tears.
Literally.
Literally showered. You could feel his tears, shooting.
So in one of the lectures I was in at Honolulu, Srila Prabhupada was speaking, and he must have been speaking about pride and how it's not a good thing for people to be proud. But then he said, but to be proud of being the most confidential servitor of Krishna, that is spiritual. And I thought, did he really say that? And then he said it again. So, you know, you see him in his pictures sometimes with his head so high, holding his cane, and that's why, because he feels himself the most confidential servitor of Krishna.
Then Pushta Krishna asked Prabhupada, will we recognize you in the spiritual world when we arrive? And he said, yes, you will recognize me. He had previously said, and we will have big ISKCON in the spiritual world. He said, that is my role, that when you return back home, back to Godhead, the spiritual master will take your hand and put your hand in Krishna's hand and make the introduction. So that's an eternal position that he has. We are eternally related to Srila Prabhupada.
Prachur